Hello everyone, good evening. Yesterday we discussed about the knee joint biomechanics, the structure of the tibia and the fibula and femur, how the articulating surfaces are, the ligamentous attachments, the menisci, what is the importance of menisci. All this we discussed. The different bursas related to the knee joint, how it helps in the functioning of the knee joint. Now today we will discuss the osteokinematic of the knee joint. So what are the functions of the knee joint basically? The primary functions are the knee flexion and extension and the medial rotation and lateral rotation. These are the primary functions, and the secondary functions are the anterior posterior displacements of the femur or tibia and the abduction or adduction. That is the valgus and the varus forces that happens in the knee joint. So these are the how much degree of flexion and extension occurs at the knee joints. These are the ranges: 130 degree to 140 degree, extension 5 degree to 10 degree. If it is more than that, that is a genu recurvatum. Okay. The axis of rotation, medial, and this we have already discussed in the first lecture. The lateral rotation, how much degree? 0 to 40 degree, and medial rotation about 0 to 30 degree. So now let's discuss how the flexion occurs at the tibiofemoral joint. Okay. So what is the mechanism involved when the tibiofemoral joint, when there is a flexion at the knee joint occurs? Okay. So first of all, let's revise few points. Then you will be able to imagine how there is a flexion occurring. I told you that the tibiofemoral flexion and extension, the line of axis, the horizontal line pass through the femoral epicondyles. There is a large articular surface of the femur and the small tibial condyle. Okay, so it's created because of the small tibial condyle. It is creates a problem, or we can say it is a potential problem when the femur flex on the fixed tibia. Okay, so let's imagine when the tibia is fixed. If the femoral condyles are permitted to roll posteriorly on the tibial plateau, okay, though the femur would run out of the tibia and will limit the flexion exertion. Okay, so for the femoral condyles to continue to roll as flexion, the femoral condyle must anteriorly glide also. Try to understand, when the femur is fixed, when the tibia is fixed and the femur is moving. Okay, so when the femur is moving, there will be a posterior glide. Simultaneously, there will be the anteriorly shifting also. If there will be no anterior shifting, the femur will fall, but there is a little bit, so it will create a good degree of flexion. Okay. So the initiation of the knee flexion, that is about from 0 degree to 25 degree. So how it happens? The rolling of the femoral condyles on the tibia, which brings the contact of the femoral condyle posteriorly on the tibial condyle. As the flexion continues, the rolling of the femoral condyle is accompanied by the anterior glide. Okay, anterior glide, which creates a pure spin-like movement. Okay. So in this, we understood during flexion how it happens. There is a posterior glide followed by the anterior shifting. Okay, so it creates a pure spin-like motion. And similarly, while in extension, what happens? There is an anterior rolling and the posterior glide. Okay, there is an anterior rolling and the posterior glide. After the initial forward rolling, the femoral condyles glide posteriorly, just enough to continue the extension of the femur, and it is also pure spin-like movement. Fine. So when it will happen, for example, during squatting, that tibia are fixed and the femur is moving. Okay, when the femur is moving in flexion, there will be first posterior gliding, posterior rolling, followed by anterior gliding. Okay, and while in extension, when from squatting the person will come in standing position, there will be anterior rolling and the posterior glide. This is the case when we are doing squatting, when the femur is moving and the tibia is fixed. And simultaneously, when the tibia is flexing, like when we are high sitting, where the to do knee extension in high sitting position, that time the femur is fixed and the tibia is moving. In that case, the tibia rolls and glides posteriorly on the fixed femur. Okay, the rolling and gliding both will be posteriorly on the fixed femur, and the anterior roll and glide when the anterior roll and glide when there is a movement on the fixed femur. Okay, extension movement forward and backward. Okay, understood? So, as I already told you, tibiofemoral flexion and extension. Both tibia perform both posterior rolling and gliding on the relatively fixed femoral condyles, and when the tibia is extended on the fixed femur, the tibia perform both anterior rolling and gliding on the relatively fixed femoral condyles. Okay, so there are some cruciate ligaments also and menisci also which helps in the flexion and extension movement. The cruciate ligaments are very rigid segments. Okay, rigid segments. How it helps? When there is a posterior rolling of the femur during knee flexion, okay, the ACL gets tight. Okay, the ACL gets tight, and when the continued rolling of the femur, what results? It results in the translation force on the femoral condyles. And during knee extension, what happens? The femoral condyles roll anteriorly on the tibial plateau, and there the PCL becomes rigid, which checks the anterior progression of the femur, and it creates a posterior translation force on the femoral condyle. So the anterior glide of the femur during flexion is also helped by because of the shape of the menisci. This all together, the cruciate ligaments and the menisci, helps in the tightening and loosening, when to tighten and when to loosen. This cruciate ligaments helps in the movement of the knee joint properly, so that there is no risk of injury in repeated movements. Fine. Now, as I already told you, what is the knee range of flexion? The knee of flexion and extension, its flexion occurs by 130 to 140 degree. When in normal gait, 60 degree to 70 degree of the knee flexion occurs. When we do stair climbing, it is about almost 80 degree. Okay, and knee hyper extension occurs by 5 degree to 10 degree. But if it is more than that, then the genu recurvatum occurs. So in genu recurvatum, what you have to keep it in mind? How you will check? By observation, you can see the genu recurvatum, but when you have to see how accurately the degree of angle you have to measure, always tell the X-ray person to take the X-ray of the knee joint not in lying position, in the standing position, lateral view. So we'll get a good view, and how much degree of hyperextension is there, we'll be able to measure. Fine. Another movement is the medial rotation and the lateral rotation. Okay, I think my slides are up and down. So after flexion and extension, we'll discuss the medial rotation and the lateral rotation. So the medial and lateral rotations of the tibia on the femur. Okay, so the knee joint, this occurs at the longitudinal axis, which passes through the medial tibial intercondylar tubercle. Okay, so the medial condyle acts as a pivot joint, and the lateral condyles move through the arc of motion. The lateral condyle has a large degree of arc of movement, and the medial condyle acts as a pivot joint. As the tibia laterally rotates, okay, understood? When the tibia laterally rotates, I'm not talking about the femur, I'm talking about the tibia. When the tibia laterally rotates, the medial tibial condyle move only slightly anteriorly on the fixed femoral condyle, while the lateral tibial condyle moves a large distance posteriorly on the fixed lateral femoral condyle. Okay, and when there is a tibial medial rotation, the medial tibial condyle moves slightly posteriorly, whereas the lateral condyle moves anteriorly through the large arc of motion. So both the medial and tibial lateral rotations, the knee joint menisci will distort in the direction of movement. That will help how they have to give the support to the movements, the medial and the lateral rotation. Understood what I'm trying to say? When the tibia laterally rotates, the medial tibial condyle will shift anteriorly on the fixed femoral condyle, and during when there is a tibial medial rotation, the medial tibial condyle will move slightly posteriorly, and the lateral condyle will move anteriorly to the large arc of motion. The range of knee joint rotation depends on the flexion and extension of the knee. Okay, so when the knee is in full extension, what happens? When the knee is in full extension, the ligaments get taut, the tubercles are lodged in the intercondylar notch, the menisci are tightly imposed, and movement occurs. Okay, so at 90 degree, mostly the rotations you can see at the when the 90 degree of total medial line rotation is approximately occurs at the 35 degree, the lateral rotation slightly greater to 0 to 20 degree than the medial rotation. Okay, another movement is the varus and the valgus, abduction and the adduction movement. Okay, so there is a, you can see when there is any ligamentous laxity, you can see the excessive varus and the valgus motion. If you have heard about the test we performed when there is a ligamentous injury, you check. Okay, so that is not that much of the movement occurs, but there is a bit of varus and valgus movement occurs at the knee joint also. Now we'll study about the locking and unlocking mechanism, that is the screw hand mechanism. So before that, I would like to explain you about the couple motions. What are the couple motions? Couple motions means the two motions occurring at the same time. Okay. The true flexion and extension axis is not perpendicular to the shaft of the femur and the tibia. Okay, when you see draw a line, the shaft of the femur and tibia are not in the perpendicular direction. So the flexion and do not occur in a pure sagittal plane. Okay, so it doesn't occur in the sagittal plane, but includes the frontal plane also. So both the components are included and creates coupled motion. Okay, so when the knee flexion, with knee flexion around the obliquely oriented axis, the tibia moves from a position oriented slightly lateral to the femur to a position slightly medial to the femur in full flexion. Okay, when you flex the knee, you can see the movement of the tibia where it is moving. Okay, so just try to do by yourself. When you flex the knee, the tibia moves from the slightly lateral to the femur to a position medial to the femur. You can see in hand also. When you move, how it goes. When it in full flexion, it comes in middle, but when it's extension, it goes laterally. So similarly in the knee also, it happens like that. So flexion is there, considered to be a coupled with the varus motion. And while with extension, it is coupled with the valgus motion. So both the movements are occurring simultaneously with single motion. So these are called as the coupled movements. Okay, when there is a flexion, it's coupled with the varus motion. When there is extension, it is coupled with the valgus motion. So these two movements, when occur simultaneously, are called as the coupled movements. Okay, now we'll discuss what is automatic or locking mechanism of the knee. Okay, when there is a lateral rotation of the tibia that occurs at the final stages of the knee extension, it is not voluntary. It occurs by the muscular forces. So this coupled motion is also called as the autonomic or the terminal rotations. As we have studied that the medial articular surface of the knee is slightly longer and the lateral articular surface is little small. So what happens because of the large articular surface? What happens when during there is a last 30 degree of knee extension, the shorter lateral tibial plateau completes its rolling and gliding motion before. Okay, the rolling and gliding motion that occurs completed only, but because of the large articular surface of the medial articular surface is long, the rolling and gliding continues to occur. Okay, so as the extension continues, the longer medial tibial plateau continues to roll anteriorly and the lateral side of the plateau has halted. Okay, The lateral side is halted and the rolling and gliding is continued at the medial side. So this continued anterior motion of the medial tibial condyle results in lateral rotation of the tibia on the femur. Okay, so you will see that there is a little bit lateral rotation of the femur, of the tibia on the femur, which is can be seen at the 5 degree of extension. Increase in the tension at the knee joint ligaments, and when there is when at the last full extension is there, you will see that the position is in the closed pack position or the lock position. So in that lock position, what happens? The tibia tubercles is lodged with the intercondylar notch. The menisci are tightly adhere to the tibial and the femoral condyles, and all the ligaments become taut. So this automatic rotation is called as the locking or the screw home mechanism. And when the flexion is continued, now we have to move the limb from the knee flexion to the full extension. So what happens from to initiate the knee flexion? What happens? The knee joint has to be unlocked. When there will be unlocking, then only you can go for the knee extension. So what happens in unlocking mechanism? The laterally rotated tibia will not be able to flex easily, but has to medially rotate also. So the flexion continues. Okay. In lateral rotation, it will not be able to just loosen up. So it has to be medial rotation of the will automatically result in the medial rotation of the tibia. And because of this, the longer medial side. Now, in this, what happens while extension? The medial side will, the movement will occur before the lateral compartment. So this is the unlocking and the locking knee. Okay. The femoral extension from the 30 degree of flexion, the larger medial femoral condyles continue rolling and gliding posteriorly. When the smaller lateral side has stopped, this results in medial rotation of the tibia on the femur, which is seen in the last 5 degree of extension. Okay. So rotation within the joint, it is called as the closed pack or the lock position, the locking mechanism or the screw home mechanism. Okay. In the unlocking of the knee joint, first the medial condyle, the larger medial condyle will move, and followed by the lateral condyle. Okay. The popliteus muscle is the main primary muscle to unlock the knee joint. This I have explained you what are the role of the cruciate ligaments in flexion and extension. Okay, this we have discussed. What are the same tibiofemoral extension? Okay. Okay. The medial rotation and the lateral rotation, axis, vertical axis, plane, the transverse plane, rotation maximum is available. Okay, when the knee is 90 degree flex, we will the lateral rotation, maximum medial and lateral rotation. When you have to make the patient sit in a 90 degree of knee flexion. So what meniscus helps? It reduces the friction and distribute femoral condyle force created on the tibial condyle without restricting the motion. Meniscus also maintain the relationship of the tibia and the femoral condyle just as it did in the flexion and extension. Varus and the valgus movement in the anterior posterior axis, frontal plane. So 8 degree at full extension, 20 degree at the knee flexion. Now we'll discuss the patellofemoral joint. Okay. So what are the primary functions of the patellofemoral joint? It works primarily as the anatomical pulley. It reduces the friction between the quadriceps tendon and the femoral condyle. The ability of the patella to perform its knee motion depends on its mobility. Okay. So articulating surface. How is the articulating surface of the patellofemoral joint? The triangular shaped patella is the last sesamoid bone. Okay, and it is very least congruent joint. The posterior surface is divided by the vertical ridge into medial and lateral patellar facets.
Carolyn. No, della sentite. Wow.
The sorry. Okay, the posterior surface is divided by a vertical ridge into medial and lateral patellar facets. The ridge is located slightly towards the middle, making a medial facet. The medial and lateral facets are convex to side from top to bottom. 30% of the patella have second ridge separating medial facet from the extreme ridge, known as the old facet of the patella. This is the femoral articulating surface. The patella articulates in femur with the intercondylar. The sulcus on the surface of the distal femur. Femoral surface are concave side to side and convex top to bottom, but the lateral the position of the patella in femoral surface is related to the length of the patellar tendon. Okay, so patellar tendon, and this is approximately 1:1. It is known as the intercality index. If there is an excessive long tendon, which points to abnormally high position of the patella in femoral surface. Okay, in neutral or extended knee, the patella has
he's a parent also. So second third में
self Nitisha Purohit.
सही है, उनको पता है क्या.
At 10 degree to 20 degree of flexion, contact with the inferior margin of the medial and lateral facet. By 90 degree of flexion, all portions of the patella contact with the femur except the odd facet. Beyond 90 degree of flexion, medial condyle, the intercondylar notch and the odd facet achieves contact for the first time, and at the 35 degree of the flexion, contact is on the lateral and odd facet with the medial facet completely out of the contact. So these are the at what ranges the patella is in contact with different structures that I have explained. Okay. So patellofemoral stabilizer. Okay, so patellofemoral stabilizer stability is given by the transverse group of stabilizer and the longitudinal group of stabilizer. The transverse stabilizers are the medial and lateral retinacular, vastus medialis and lateralis. The lateral PF ligament contributes to 53% of the total force when in full extension of the knee. Longitudinal stabilization is given by the patellar tendon inferiorly and the quadriceps tendon superiorly. Okay, patellar tracking. When the knee is in fully extended or relaxed position, the patella should be able to passively displace medially or laterally, not more than half the patella. Imbalance in the passive tension or change in the line of pull of the dynamic structures will substantially influence the patella. So abnormal force may influence the exertion of the patella, even if it's in more secure position within the intercondylar notch flexion. So if there is an abnormal force, it will create a tension in other structures. So the force and the line of pull, the dynamic structure should be able to maintain the position of the patella. Since the action of line of quadriceps and patellar tendon do not coincide, patella tend to pull slightly laterally and increase compression on the lateral patellar facets. Larger force on patella may cause it to subluxate or dislocate off the lateral lip of the femur. Genu valgum also increases the obliquity of the femur and creates oblique force, the pull of the quadriceps. Femoral anteversion and tibial torsion creates an excessive obliquity in patella, predisposing to excessive lateral pressure or to the subluxation or dislocation. Excessive tension in lateral retinaculum may cause the patella to tilt laterally. And if there is an insufficient height of the lateral lips of the femoral sulcus, may create patellar subluxation or the fully dislocation, even if there is a very less lateral. So what are the muscles of the knee joint? The one joint muscles and the two joint muscles. Okay, the anterior are the vastus lateralis, medialis, and the intermedialis. Two joint are the rectus femoris. Posteriorly is the biceps femoris short head, and two joint are the biceps femoris, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, sartorius, gracilis, and gastrocnemius. And one more we can add plantaris. Okay, in some it is patient, in some people it is present, in some people it doesn't. And the lateral is the tensor fascial lata. Okay, the muscles of the posterior knee, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, sartorius, gracilis, popliteus, gastrocnemius. Okay, plus plantaris. Okay, it may be, it may not be present. Flexion and the tibial medial rotators. What are the medial rotators and flexion of the knee joint? Popliteus, gracilis, sartorius, semimembranosus, and tendinosus. Flexion and tibial lateral rotators, biceps femoris. Flexion and abductor, biceps femoris, lateral head of the gastrocnemius, and popliteus. Flexion in adductor, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, medial head of the gastrocnemius, sartorius, and gracilis. Okay. So what lateral muscles helps in? Capable of producing valgus movement at the knee and can generate varus movements. Okay, these are the attachments, how it is attached, long head and the short head. Okay, it starts from the tuberosity of the ischium. The short head starts from the lower portion of the shaft of the femur and it attaches to the head of the fibula. Semitendinosus and the medial hamstring, tuberosity of the ischium, and attaches to the medial aspect of the tibia of the knee joint. Gastrocnemius. Okay, the proximal attachment above the femoral condyles and attaches to the posterior calcaneus. Popliteus, it's a very strong tendon at the lateral condyle of the femur and it gets attached in a widespread of proximal distal direction, giving somewhat attachment in a triangular shape. Okay, it helps in the medial rotation and the flexion of the knee joint. What are the muscles passing through the medial knee? The sartorius, gracilis, and the semitendinosus. Anterior muscles, the quadriceps group, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, intermedialis, and the medialis. Okay, so what are the functions? So, four components of the quadriceps femoral function to extend the knee. The most of the function of the quadriceps muscle is the extension of the knee. Okay, so how patella influences the quadriceps function? Patella lengthens the momentum of quadriceps by increasing the distance between the quadriceps tendon and the patellar tendon from the axis of the knee joint. The patella is an anatomic pulley which deflects the action of the line of quadriceps away from the joint center, which increases the angle of pull and enhancing the extension torque. Okay, so pull of the quadriceps also creates the anterior translation of the tibia on femur, which increases the ACL restraint. Okay, so how during weight bearing, how quadriceps works? When an erect posture is attained, when there is a weight bearing of the joint, so there is a minimal activity of the quadriceps because of the line of gravity passes just anterior to the knee axis and results in gravitational extension torque moment. Okay, so the joint is in extension. In weight bearing, with the knee slightly flexed, the LOG pass posterior to the knee joint axis. As the gravitational torque tend to promote knee flexion, the activity of the quadriceps is necessary to counterbalance the gravitational torque and to maintain the knee joint in equilibrium. So, in extension, full extension, the LOG is anterior to the knee. Okay, so when the flexion starts, the LOG, the line of gravity passes posteriorly, slowly. More than knee flexion, the line of gravity will pass posteriorly. Okay, see, in extension it is straight, with small degree of flexion, with a little bit more, and in full squatting position, how the line of gravity balances. Okay, and during non-weight bearing activities, the momentum of resistance is minimal when the knee is flexed to 90 degree, but increases as the knee extension progresses. So therefore, greater quadriceps force is required as the knee approaches during full extension. Okay, and the opposite happens in weight bearing activities. Right? So quadriceps strengthening, weight bearing versus non-weight bearing. Weight bearing quadriceps exercise such as squat and leg press result in the posterior shear force at the knee throughout the entire range of motion. So there was no anterior shear anywhere in the range of motion. In contrast, the anterior shear force in the non-weight bearing knee extension exercise, maximal anterior shear occur between the 20 degree to 10 degree. Quadriceps strengthening, weight bearing versus non-weight bearing. So how it occurs, but when we have to give quadriceps strengthening between the weight bearing and the non-weight bearing. Okay, a posterior shear force was also found during non-weight bearing exercise only between 60 degree and 101 degree of flexion. Weight bearing exercises are often prescribed after PCL and ACL injury because of the less stressful, more like functional movements, and are safer than non-weight bearing exercise. The other muscles helping in knee extension are the gluteus maximus and the soleus muscle, reinforcing anterolateral aspect of the knee joint, assist ACL in checking posterior femoral and anterior tibial translations. Okay, with the knee flexion, the combination of the IT band, LCL, and the popliteal tendon increases the stability of the lateral knee. So, what is the action of for the ITB? In extended knee, the IT band moves anterior to the knee joint axis, and in flexed knee, the IT band moves posterior to the lateral femoral condyle. So, all the time it is taut, regardless of the hip or the knee position, which increases the stability of the knee joint. So, what are the knee joint stabilizer? There's the static stabilizer also and the dynamic stabilizer also. So, static stabilizers are the capsules and ligaments. Okay, MCL, LCL, ACL, PCL, oblique ligament, transverse ligament, meniscopatellar ligament, and the dynamic stabilizer are the quadriceps femoris, IT band, extensor retinaculum, popliteus pes ansaris, hamstring and gastrocnemius. Medial joint stabilizers are the medial patello-retinaculum, MCL, oblique popliteal ligament, and the PCL. And the lateral joint stabilizers are the IT band, biceps femoris, popliteus, LCL, meniscofemoral arcuate, ACL, and the lateral patellar retinaculum. Okay, so the anterior posterior hyperextension stabilizer are which are the structures involved? The IT band, hamstring muscles, soleus muscles, gluteus muscle. Okay, and what are the function? It limits the anterior tibial or the posterior femoral translation. Okay, and the posterior arcuate ligaments. What are the structures? Meniscofemoral ligaments, quadriceps muscle, popliteus muscles, and the medial and lateral heads of the gastrocnemius. So both the anterior and posterior hyperextension muscle limit the anterior tibial translation and the posterior tibial translation. Okay, so the valgus stabilizers and the varus stabilizers. Okay, so these are all the anterior cruciate ligament, posterior cruciate ligament, arcuate ligament, posterior oblique ligament, sartorius muscle, gracilis muscle, semitendinous, semimembranous, and medial right of gastrocnemius muscle, which limits the varus movement of the tibia and the varus stabilizer, anterior cruciate, posterior cruciate, biceps femoris muscle, lateral right of the gastrocnemius, limits the valgus movements of the tibia. Internal and the external rotational stabilizer, which limits the medial rotation of the tibia and the lateral rotation of the tibia. So these are the structures involved. Okay, so posterior cruciate ligament, posterior medial capsule, meniscofemoral ligament, and the biceps femoris. This limits the medial rotation of the tibia, and the medial collateral ligament, lateral collateral ligament, obliquus muscle, sartorius, gracilis, and the semitendinous muscle. These are all the lateral rotation of the tibia. So with this, I finished with the biomechanics of the knee joint. That's all I have referred all these books: Dawkins, Kinesiology and Anatomy, okay, Lippert, and basic biomechanics of the musculoskeletal system, body. Thank you for your time. For listening this lecture. I hope it will give you a good idea of the biomechanics of the knee joint and will help you to understand better. I have tried to cover most of the portion in this, but maybe some portion if I have left, you can ping me in group. We'll discuss in that also. So thank you very much. With this, I finish my knee joint biomechanics. Thank you.
Hello. That's what I'm talking about. Hello.